In the debate between free speech and campus anti-Semitism, the latest shocker has come from the so-called Ivy League colleges of the U.S. The presidents of Harvard, MIT and University of Pennsylvania faced criticism and intense scrutiny after a video of their testimonies at the Congressional hearing on anti-Semitism on campus went viral. When Representative Elise Stefanik asked the presidents, Gay, McGill and Conbluth on whether calls for genocide of Jews violates their respective universities' code of conduct on bullying or harassment, the trio repeatedly refused a clear yes or no. None of them explicitly said that calls for the genocide of Jews are against the university's regulations. Listen in to what they said.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. At Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it
and is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
Now, this video received severe backlash, with many saying that they are ashamed of what they heard. While the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, termed this as unacceptable, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro called Penn President McGill's statements unacceptable and shameful. Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla said in a post on X that the testimony is one of the most despicable moments in the history of US academia. Here in India too, economist Sanjeev Sanyal and historian Vikram Path called out the university heads and warned of how a similar situation in India must be prevented. Now, here's the twist. Harvard University then put out a clarification tweet. And, till then, of course, the damage was done. The Penn University head also had a change of tone. She posted a video. Take a look at it.
There was a moment during yesterday's congressional hearing on anti-Semitism when I was asked if a call for the genocide of Jewish people on our campus would violate our policies. In that moment, I was focused on our university's longstanding policies aligned with the US Constitution, which say that speech alone is not punishable. I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate.
Now, these developments, remember, aren't new to the US. Since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, now just countries and leaders, but students across American campuses have been divided over pro-Israel and pro-Palestine groups. From verbal protests to heckling and manhandling, college campuses in America are witnessing scary, violent scenes, all to defend what students believe in. But do calls for genocide really qualify as freedom of expression? And why should we be very, very concerned about heads of educational institutes not condemning harassment? On the show today, I'm joined by Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. He's an international strategic advisor. He joins us from Washington. He's, in fact, serving currently at the George Washington University. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal joins us, and Kartikeya Tanna, author and columnist, also joins us. Namaskar, good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now. I'd like to start with you, Pradeep Kapoorji. You're serving there at the George Washington University. Help us first understand what's the kind of, atmosphere you have been seeing in American college campuses since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. Because the visuals and the protests and the, voices that are coming out of these campuses are very, very concerning, with students, getting violent. And now we have all these slogans and chants and calls for the genocide of Jews.
Yes, thank you, Shreya, for discussing this issue. It's a very important, situation, and very sort of precarious situation for the universities in the United States, but not only in the United States, also in India, also in Europe and other places. Because you have these, protests, these very threatening activities, these acts of anti-Semitism, and also threatening the other communities also, like the Hindu community in particular, sometimes the Muslim community. Now, colleges are supposed to be sanctuaries of learning, of education, and knowledge. And the people who are there, the students who are there, are supposed to have a safe environment. Now, to not have that safe environment, and in this case, we are dealing with some of the topmost universities of the United States of America, which include the Harvard, the MIT, and the UPenn. And one of my sons went to UPenn. And for me, it pains me a lot to see how it has evolved over the last few years. And to see the free rein given to, students who are terrorizing others in a very blatant form, and disrupting the peace of the university, disrupting the activities of the university. And the presidents of these universities to make these statements. And a president of a university is a very important person in the US system. But a president of an Ivy League university, which all these three universities are, that is something very, very prestigious in the US hierarchy. But for these presidents,
and that's what is concerning,
in the strongest
not just here in India, but across the world.
And
the fact that the heads of these leading colleges and universities, please go ahead.
Absolutely, but there is, a book which is called Snakes in the Ganges, which talks about breaking India forces and the breaking US forces. And in that book, they have highlighted very clearly, the authors, Rajiv Malhotra and Vijaya, that Harvard University is the epicenter of wokeism. How it has become the epicenter of wokeism is something which the people have to understand. Where is the funding coming from? A lot of the funding is coming also from countries like China, from George Soros Foundation, and unfortunately, from some Indian groups which are very patriotic in India and globally, but they have given endowments to Harvard, like the Tata Group and the Mahindra Group, and have centers in their names. And they have sort of no control over these sort of activities which are going on in those centers also, which support all these sort of activities. And some of them were signatories to the 35 groups from Harvard which signed that petition against Israel. So to see this conjunction of breaking India forces and the breaking US forces coming together is a big threat to both our countries. And both our countries have to understand how to deal with it. how to challenge the sources of funding, how to control those, and how to have a sort of a balance brought into the campuses so that peace again prevails. We have also written an op-ed about how Palestine and Israel have to learn to coexist, and what is the future path, aspirational path, if there has to be peace and development in that area. Now, if you are in one of these Muslim countries, which is very, very Islamicized, and you're going to a madrasa at the age of 5, 6, and you're learning, the only things you're learning is about terrorism, is about guns, is about killing Jews, is about wiping off Israel from the face of the earth, is about killing everybody else who is not a Muslim. And you grow up in that milieu, and then you continue in the milieu, in the same milieu, in masjids, in the mosques, with the imams, with the mullahs. So you are bringing up an ecosystem of people who are almost going to be raised as terrorists. When you see the visual images of the attack on Israel on October 7th, who are the people who are carrying out the attacks? Very young people from the ages of 15 to 25 mostly. There were very few who are above that age. So
I think you've made an interesting point, Ambassador Kapoor, that of funding of these colleges and universities. Kartikeya Tanna, Ambassador Kapoor made an important point. Is this just about political ideology? Is it just about student politics and young passionate students having an opinion on the war and taking sides, or is it more than that? Ambassador Kapoor pointed towards the funding of these universities and colleges and how perhaps that has also influenced the kind of narrative that goes on at these campuses.
Shreya, it's a combination of funding, which funders, which donors have more weight at a particular point of time, as well as the prevailing political trends. But also there's one more important thing which needs to be dug in, and I hope journalists do that. It's how these presidents are selected. There's a concept of DEI, diversity, that has led to essentially merit being given a second place. So when selections are made, and this is a lesson for India, when selections are made on the basis on factors other than merit, then what happens is you have someone at the helm of affairs who's ready to look the other way on one violation and be extremely focused on the other. I'll give you one example. What is the rule of law? These Ivy Leagues and the establishment keep talking about rule of law. Even the Canadian Prime Minister talked about the rule of law. What is that? It basically means that there is a law that is laid down and everyone has to follow it and everyone has to implement it. But in Harvard, calling a biological male who then converted the gender into female, but if you call that person a male, that's abuse. Harvard actually told students that if you use the wrong pronouns of a person, then that literally amounts to abuse. If you do sizeism, if you do fat phobia, if you remark on their weight, that is abuse. But what's not abuse? Calling for genocide of Jews. You see the sheer hypocrisy and the sheer bizarreness of this rule.
The hypocrisy.
So I think what happens is so the rule that they're following based on this confluence of donors, of the prevailing political trends, as well as the personal views of people who are elected to the helm of affairs because of these, non-meritorious considerations like DEI, etc., is that they follow the notion, show me the man, show me the offender, and I will tell you what the rule is. And if you hear the speeches of these, the answers of these three presidents in the Congress, the way the code of conduct is drafted, it's so vague, and it's purposefully vague so that they can apply that as and when they want against whichever offender that they want. So if I accidentally use the wrong pronouns of someone, then I'm abusive. But if I say, intifada, genocide of Jews, wipe out all the Jews, I'm completely protected, based on their policy. So this is obviously, it's hypocritical, but it's purposely hypocritical because these universities are now under the grasp of donors, prevailing political trends, and all these influences. And it's unfortunate that these big name institutions are now falling prey to these compulsions.
Yeah, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, what we got the reactions after this congressional hearing and the criticism that followed was from the White House calling these statements as, the fact that they are uncalled for, that there should be complete condemnation of these chants and these slogans and these calls for genocide that have been made on US college campuses. How much of it, how much of government intervention helps in such cases? Because clearly what these heads of universities and colleges have said is in contrast to what the American government's stand is on this anyway.
Well, Shreya, certainly government statements and the statements of university heads can help in controlling such sentiments. Let me mention that this entire controversy is taking place against the background of the fact that incidents of anti-Semitism or hatred against Jews have risen several times, not just in the United States, but also in Canada and in some European countries. And this has happened since the Hamas attack on Israel and the subsequent Israeli counterstrike in Gaza. Now, what has been of particular concern recently are the anti-Semitic incidents on US campuses. As a result, the federal government of the United States has started investigations into what has happened in several universities, including Harvard University, MIT, and UPenn. What the government is trying to assess is why is anti-Semitism rising in the universities, and whether the people who are in charge of running the universities are doing enough to control this phenomena. And the US Congress, therefore, held a hearing into what has been taking place. And the presidents of Harvard University, UPenn, and MIT were called to testify before a House Education Committee to answer criticism that they were not doing enough to counter anti-Semitism on their campuses. Now, what did these people say? The university presidents tried to present the anti-Semitic chants during anti-Israel protests on campuses as cases of freedom of expression. They tried to argue that the universities had mechanisms to deal with harassment and bullying, but they would not curb freedom of expression. Now, the videos of their hearings in the US Congress have become viral, and people have begun to say that it is because of the stand that these people are taking, the presidents of the universities, that anti-Semitism is not being checked. And in fact, there is a lot of concern. There has been a lot of criticism for whatever these three heads, the three presidents of these three
and that is why, of course, they've put out clarifications also. And that is why they've put out clarification posts and tweets. But Kartikeya, there was a time when there was student politics on campuses, when different student groups, and it happens, now also, that they have a difference of opinion, they talk about it, they debate, they have, fierce debates over different topics, and that's how student politics was conducted at one time. But with the advent of social media, and that penetrating into college campuses, I'm sure the nature of these protests have changed, because students, individuals consuming social media content have an echo chamber around them, and they believe whatever is shown to them as per the algorithm. And that's why there's a certain kind of narrative that also pushes these conflicts between student groups on ground.
Yes, I mean, yes, you hit the nail on the head. Yes, the conduct of the universities and the presidents should be criticized, but there's also an equal amount of attention that must be drawn on the conduct of the students. Now, why are they so brainwashed That's a thought to ponder about. And my belief and my analysis is that they don't want to dig deep into the nuances of an issue in order to come to some objective realization of what's going on. So what they do is they kind of flock to the fancy trends that are going on right now. And on social media, yes, you're right. That is what we see primarily. The left, the so-called left Islamist mindset has occupied the social media. And if you see trends, if you see what's going on, it's mostly anti-Israel. And then that, leads to popular memes and popular social media posts that are, some of them are very inflammatory in nature, but then these students are consuming that, and then they join this herd that they see in the college. Now, again, who inspired that and who started that? That's, again, something for the colleges to investigate. But then the students, just like flock of sheep, they join them, and they don't even understand what they're supporting or what they're endorsing and what chants they're making. From river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, intifada. They don't understand that that's a call for genocide of Jews. That's basically a call for non-acceptance of Jews. So that is a very worrying development in students. And what I wish, again, we take it to the India context, what I wish is that Indian universities, while allowing free speech to exist and prevail, also encourage students to understand the nuances of issue, because we saw that during CAA protests as well, how so many millions of young people were completely lost about what the CAA actually stands for. They believed in something that wasn't even the case, that Muslims, 200 million Muslims will be wiped out or thrown out of India. And they started believing that to be true, which was not even remotely the intent or the objective of the CAA. So I hope
Kartikeya, the challenge in this situation is that in the case of CAA, perhaps you had a document which people could read up and clarify their doubts and get a clearer, clearer mindset on that. But when there's a war situation, nobody going on ground to Israel or to Palestine to check out the actual ground situation in a war. How do you get authentic, real information in a war situation?
Right. I mean, you can criticize Israel government's, lack of proportionality, or, maybe even it's a little more, disproportionate, etc. Whatever, you can have an opinion about that. But to then completely oppose it and to join a herd that calls for essentially elimination of the state of Israel and therefore elimination of Jews, that is something, that leap from criticizing someone objectively for their response or the quantum of response to straight away joining this herd in a prestigious university like Harvard. A few months ago, or maybe actually right when the Israel attack, the Hamas attack happened, there were some student bodies that posted some very objectionable posts, and so many students just joined in signature, and names were flashed all over. And then they realized, wait, we didn't even know what we were signing. The former president of Harvard actually tweeted that law students who are studying in Harvard Law, the best law college in the world, reportedly, they didn't understand what they were signing on. And these are people who study law at Harvard. Again, it's unfortunate that it's come to that, and I'm ready to believe that some of them did not understand what they were signing on.
Yeah.
But my hope for India is that because India is a much more conscious and aware country, my hope is that, we encourage nuance, we encourage people to find their own objective fact, come to their own objective analysis, and then, sure, participate in a protest if they want to, but not just join a herd, which calls for something as brutal as this.
Sure. Pradeep Kapoorji, of course, this case is very, very clear, calls for genocide of any group, not just the Jews, does call for condemnation. It shouldn't be allowed in any college or university campus anywhere in the world. But there are certain situations where authorities at campuses have to make their way through freedom of expression versus whatever debate is going on the campus. How do college campuses, college authorities really pave their way through such situations, such tricky situations?
Thank you, Shreya. I think it's a very important point, because it's a very, very difficult situation when you get into a discussion on a sensitive topic like this, it's very difficult to maintain your cool and to not flare, the tempers getting flared. So what I think is very, very important is, firstly, primarily the Islamic and the Muslim community leaders all over the world to reflect and ponder upon where their youth is headed. Because if you see the overall performance of the Islamic communities in the last hundreds of years, the contribution to creativity, knowledge, science, technology, in terms of the per capita inputs which have been given, or the Nobel Prizes received by the Muslim community or the Muslim countries, is very, very minimal, is absolutely insignificant statistically. So how do they bring the youth and their entire communities on a path to becoming contributors towards economic development, towards the understanding of sciences, towards creativity, instead of becoming destructive? Because the whole world currently is on edge. Many countries we have seen, even in Europe and in America, and I was absolutely scandalized and shocked to see the sort of protest which took place in front of the White House, where they were trying to scale the fences of the White House and they were rattling the entrance gates as if they were going to break it down. So the most secure premises in the world, the house and the office of the President of the United States was threatened by a mob which was almost maybe a couple of 100,000 strong. And it would have become a very, very difficult situation.
So more awareness and more communication, perhaps?
Yes. So for that sort of thing to happen in the capital of the most powerful country of the world is an eye-opening call for everybody to understand that it's a very serious situation. And all the communities also have to think and reflect about solutions.
Countries across the world should learn their lessons.
But primarily, it is incumbent
They
upon
should come
the
together.
Muslim
They should learn these lessons.
That how are they going to put their youth on the right track and not just rear them as terrorists and then have faced the wrath of the world, which will ultimately happen, as we are seeing in Israel also. Because if you leave the others with no other recourse but to have a very violent response, because you're all the time attacking people, saying all Kafirs must be wiped out, all others must be killed or converted to the Islamic faith.
Okay, so we'll have, as I said, we'll have to learn our lessons from this, not just in US and India, but other countries as well. I'll have to wrap this up here. Pradeep Kapoor, Kartikeya Tanna and Prabhu Dayal, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast tonight and sharing your perspective on this contentious issue. With that, it's a wrap on Beyond the Headline, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Thank you very much for joining us right now. Bye-bye. Good night.